Good morning, everyone. I am Peter Friedman, CEO and President of AgileCap, a specialty lender focused exclusively on the insurance agency industry. We at AgileCap believe that agency owners can take control of their business when they fully understand finances and have a partner who can work with them who understands the industry specifically. And we'll talk through that as well as everything that's going on. AgileCap, fortunately, has been around over 20 years, and so we've been through some ups and downs in the U.S. economy and have some insight, although we're in a new world right now, and we'll have a lot of uncertainty as well. We are happy to discuss generally in financing. Most specifically, we want to talk about the SBA PPP program, which we will discuss for a period of time. We are also looking for the opportunity for questions. I'd like to ask my colleague, Kyle Castle, to introduce himself.
Good morning. My name is Kyle Castle. I've been with AgileCap for a couple years now. I come from a commercial lending background. I've been in the finance world for about 15 years, and I really enjoy discussing everyone's unique and individual situations, and love to be able to hear how you run and operate your business. And if you've got general financing questions like Peter mentioned, we'd be happy to discuss that with you and help you along this journey. So with that, I will turn off my webcam so we can focus on the meeting. But if you've got any questions, please reach out to Peter or myself, and we'll be happy to address those with you. So thank you.
Thanks, Kyle. Also on the call is Wendy Avery, who is our head of marketing. If you have questions or anything for her specifically, we're happy to answer them. What the purpose of this conversation will be to talk initially about the SBA PPP program, and I'll turn off my webcam. I will ask that you just put questions out in the chat. I can hopefully see them come through, and I will try to address them. And we will try to pause for periods of time if people have specific questions. So let's jump in. So I'll give you a brief overview of the PPP program and what's involved. This was a program that was launched only a handful of weeks ago. It is designed to stimulate the U.S. economy and most specifically address a shortage and unemployment that is rampant throughout the U.S. The most recent numbers coming out this morning over the last month has been over 20 million have filed for unemployment insurance. It's a loan program run through the Small Business Administration that provides payroll and debt and utility relief for a period of roughly 2 months, hopefully to jumpstart the economy. All small businesses, whether you're formed as a corporation, an LLC, or anything of the sort, are able to access this program. And I thought it'd be helpful if Kathy could launch a couple polls that we have out there for everyone, for us now to understand, for those of you who maybe have applied for PPP loans or those who have been funded or approved or anything of the sort. Kathy, if you could go ahead and do that, that would be great. So we just get to see.
Okay, I will start the poll now, if you can answer this first question.
And Amber, the first question just came through, and the obvious, which happened just this morning, about less than an hour before we started. So it came across the wire at around, I'd say 11 a.m. Eastern, somewhere in that realm, is that the Payroll Protection Plan, or the PPP, has effectively run out of money. And so has made this conversation a little bit potentially moot, as technically the program, if you have not already applied, and it's uncertain whether it's also applied and been approved, whether there's available money out there just yet. Currently.
So if you can, I have the first question, Peter launched. So have you applied for SBA PPP program? If you can indicate yes or no. We're just waiting for a few more folks to answer that question, and then we will launch those results, and then we'll jump into the second question, launch those results, and then the third question. How's that sound, Peter?
That sounds perfect. And we'll just start to gather a little bit of information. And
Okay, just a couple seconds here. If we can get we just have a few more people. We're waiting to vote. Give us a yes or no to this question, if you would, for those that just joined us. And okay, I'm going to go ahead and close that poll, and I will go ahead and share that with you. Can you see those results, Peter?
This is where I might be new to GoToMeeting.
Okay, I can share it with you. So have you applied for an SBA PPP program? 95% of the folks that answered, 48% said yes, 52 said no. So
Okay.
out of those that said yes, I'll go ahead and launch the second question. If
Great.
so, if you have been approved, yes or no. If you can answer that question next, that would be great. And we'll give everybody a moment to do so, and I'll keep you posted.
Great, that's helpful. I can,
Okay,
as
we
people
got
are,
about,
yeah, just tell me when you want to close the poll.
sure. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and give you a couple more minutes, seconds, not minutes,
Yeah.
to answer that. If you have filed for the loan, the SBA PPP program, have you been approved, yes or no? I'll go ahead and close that. And let me share that. So out of those that have applied, 81% have not been approved, 19% have been approved.
Mm-hmm.
All right, now let's launch the last question then. For those of you that have been approved, have you been funded, yes or no? So out of those that have been approved, if you can answer this question, that would be great. Couple more seconds. Okay, I'll go ahead and close that poll and share that final one with everybody. So out of those that have been approved, have you been funded? 33% said yes, 67% said no.
So
Right.
a very small number is what appears to be the case. 50% essentially have applied. Of that 50%, 20% have been approved. So effectively 10% of the population of this call. And of that, a third of those, so 3%. So I would say about, based on the fact that there are 50 people here, there's 1 or 2 people who've been funded, 5 or 6, somewhere in that realm, who've been approved, and roughly 25 have applied, just to give context for numbers. What we're hearing is those numbers are generally in line with the market. Right now, we're talking to lots of insurance agencies across the board, as well as a variety of different banks. The application rate, about 50%, is in line with what we're hearing. Most people are considering it or have done it. It has been extremely difficult to do, and we'll talk a little bit on, let's make a broad assumption that the government will come together and do additional funding. In reality, that is the expectation. Currently, the federal government is trying to figure out a plan on how to do that funding. There's massive demand, as $350 billion was the original allocation, and that has been used up in less than 2 weeks of time. So I can't recommend more strongly that if you haven't applied for this, that it is something that you should absolutely do. The primary reason being the key to this PPP loan is the forgiveness aspect of it, that the loan can become a grant to you as a business with minimal tax implications, aside from being a loan, even though you may not need capital or money, that it is a way to get an infusion of cash that is helpful to grow any business. And so it is something that you should strongly consider, especially with the uncertainty that we're in right now, that we don't totally know how long this will go on. And even though you may in your business not be personally impacted at the moment, the future is highly uncertain. So I'll give a quick summary of the program, talk about the forgiveness aspects of it, and we can dive into other sources of money, and we'll talk about what we call EIDL, the Economic Injury Disaster Loan as well, which is another source of capital. But the PPP, Paycheck Protection Program, you can borrow about 2.5 times of your average 12-month trailing monthly payroll. And so we're going to make up numbers for simplicity, but if your monthly payroll is $10,000 a month on average over the prior 12 months, then you can borrow $25,000. The rate, regardless of who your business is or any credit or anything of the sort, is 1%. It was fixed by the government right before they launched the program about 10 days ago or so. So this slide is incorrect. Sorry about that, as it's changing. And the term on the loan, they actually changed it to 2 years. But the true benefit of this program is the forgiveness aspect of it, that you can get up to 100% in our example of $25,000 becoming a grant, and that you will get to keep that money, don't ever have to pay it back. What you need to do is prove that for the 8-week period after you receive funding, you used money for payroll and utilities, roughly 75% for payroll and 25% for utilities. If you don't use up, in our example, the full $25,000 for payroll and utilities, the remaining difference just becomes a loan you have to pay back at a 1% interest rate over the next 24 months. So most people, it depends on your type of business, whether you're very heavy in payroll or potentially light and have other costs. You may not be able to get 100% forgiven, but even if you get a decent chunk of it for payroll and it's forgiven, it's highly advantageous. Right now, we can kind of talk a little bit about the best way to apply, with the assumption that the program will continue and the federal government will refund the available cash. Specifically, the first step that people are using with the highest success for applications is to go to your current bank where you have current accounts, business accounts, that is the ideal. Generally speaking, all banks are approved to provide these loans, and generally speaking, they are giving first priority to their current customers. And so you're best off going to whoever it is that you bank with on a regular banking basis. Our experience in talking to many people is if you have multiple banking sources, your best chance is with smaller banks. Your community, your local bank seems to be able to get through the program quicker, whether they have lower volume of applications, whatever the case may be, than what we would consider money center banks, Bank of America, Chase, Wells Fargo, those types of banks. And so if you haven't applied yet, a recommendation is to apply and start with your current bank. And if that happens to be a community bank, that's even better. If your current bank is not responsive, which is what we have found in a variety of experiences, we've seen people applying, the current bank was not responsive, they were backed up in applications, whatever the case may be, that people just went to their local bank. You have to go through the process of opening up an account, and with banks and businesses, that can be sometimes arduous, where you need appropriate corporate documentation, but your community bank seems to be the best source. If for some reason your community bank is not available, not willing to do the program, whatever the case may be, money center banks are not also willing or backed up, then the third choice, and this hit a wrinkle this week, as on Tuesday at 6 p.m. they closed the doors for these. We find that specialized SBA banks such as Live Oak are an excellent source. Now, they paused accepting all applications on Tuesday evening at 6 p.m. Because they were overwhelmed and uncertain whether there'd be available money left. So it's that would be the process that I would go through in order to choose a bank to make an application with. The other factors I think, is it doesn't matter ultimately where the money comes from. And so it's whoever you can get in line with. And I would, even though in theory they've run out of money effective today, the assumption in the federal government is that they will continue to fund that and that you should continue to get in line. As to whether or not you've been approved and what the process is, it is a bank by bank basis. Generally speaking, the money center large banks have just been sending out emails. The smaller banks, usually you end up speaking with your banker. So if you haven't gotten an email confirmation from one of the larger banks, then you haven't been approved generally. And they're trying to push everything online just due to the volume. I do see a couple questions coming through that I'm going to address real quickly. There was a mention of retirement contributions for employees in addition to payroll to calculate the 2.5 times. The specifics as to what qualifies are documented in the application process, and I don't have one in front of me. It doesn't say that like a 401 contribution is part of that, but the rules are being written as we speak to some extent. And for the most part, benefits are included and the term benefits is used. And so it kind of depends what your bank is willing to accept right now. I would imagine that if you have regular contributions and it's part of the benefits package, it would be accepted. If you were to do an exceedingly large one-time contribution, even though it's 12 months trailing, that may or may not cause issues. So, and feel free to send along any questions along the way via the chat. That's the most helpful way, and I'll see as they come through. I'm going to pause real quick. Are there any specific questions on the PPP program and what we've seen specifically? And I'll transition.
You see the other questions. I mean, you're still on the coronavirus small loan options page, correct? That was one question that came in.
Yep.
I was just wondering if you saw some of the other ones. There was some from Eric Ash. How do you know if you've been approved? Is there an email confirmation?
Yeah, so I would look for an email from a money center bank. For a larger bank, for smaller banks or community banks, I would reach out to your banker directly. We have seen multiple cases where there's a banker who knows more than the system does because they're going and talking to their internal systems. Another question coming through is a loan or grant based on a credit check. Your bank will most likely do a credit check, but it is not based on your credit. There's a couple rules about bankruptcy, defaulting on government obligations that you can't have done. It's all listed in the application. So if you filed bankruptcy in the prior period, I think it's 5 to 7 years. If you've defaulted on a government obligation like a student loan, things like that will trigger, but it's not based on credit.
Did you see the other question too? For Russ Fierce, it just said, what if you just have rent and utilities? Are you still eligible?
Yes, you're still eligible, and rent and utilities, that is something that definitely you can put in and make the application. If you're a sole proprietor, so you're only paying yourself, you can actually apply, and it depends if you're giving yourself a 1099 or a W-2. If you give yourself a W-2, you're considered payroll. If it's a 1099, you may have to apply individually, not as your business. And so it depends how you effectively pay yourself. But sole props, single member LLCs, this is one of the broadest definitions of small business that we've ever seen. So everyone sort of qualifies. Another question that just came in from Hendra was, I heard the money's gone. Yes, that is true. The money has effectively, as of this morning, been spent, all 350 billion. I would continue to apply. What we're hearing in the federal government is they are negotiating how to add an additional 250 billion to the pile of money available. And so we strongly recommend continuing to apply. And submitting applications so you get yourself in line. I think the expectation when the original 350 billion went through was there was most likely a need for more money, and so people are not surprised by this. So it's something that you should continue to apply, make sure you're getting in line so when money is available. So
did you see Kent McGee's question too? Initially, I thought there was a mention of retirement contributions for employees in addition to payroll to calculate the 2.5 times. Is that correct?
So there is, it's considered benefits is what the terminology is. And so if you've been consistently giving benefits to your clients, it will most likely apply as part of your essentially monthly payroll. So let's see here. There's a couple other questions coming through. I'm trying to, how many months of rent and utilities do you include? So you take your prior 12 months average of what you spend. Oh, sorry, that would be the rent and utilities component only comes in on the forgiveness side of it, and it's what you spend in rent and utilities for the 8-week period after you get funded. That's Russ's question. And it can be no more than 25% of the forgiveness is one of the caveats. So it's really designed to pay payroll. Amber, I appreciate you adding in that your local bank said they're still taking applications and holding it until additional funding comes through, which is the expectation. What is considered utilities? That is a great question. Anything, internet, cell phones, telephones, heat, garbage, trash, anything along those lines, water, whatever you would pay normally in utilities. And it's pretty expansive. So your cell phone bill is considered a utility in this environment. Your telephone system.
Your insurance premiums too?
Not insurance premiums.
Okay.
So does it cover normal payroll draws? Jim, if that's for yourself as an owner, yes, it depends. If you're paying yourself as a W-2, yes, it will. If you're paying yourself as a 1099, then you would have to do it your own personal application. So Jim just said he's paying himself S-Corp W-2. Yes, it would cover that. So that is the criteria. Anything that is W-2 is considered part of your monthly payroll, even if it's to yourself. If it's 1099, you personally would have to apply as essentially a self-employed contractor of sorts. So.
And Peter, Jeremy asked the question, if you apply just to apply and don't need the funding currently, can you defer the money until you need it?
The answer is no. Our recommendation in that case is apply, get the money, and use the money to do things that maybe you have some debt you would want to pay off, or hold on to the capital and see if you can. Because right now, I would imagine this is one of the unique times that this cash is available. And so, and the primary reason being there's so much uncertainty, you don't know what you're going to need in as little as 4 or 8 weeks from now, depending on your local region and what the response is to coronavirus and such. So I really strongly recommend that you do apply. So got more questions coming in. What if I wasn't open all of last year? It's so it would be for the period that you were open. So if you're open for 6 months, whatever your average payroll expenses were during that time. And yes, you would be able to apply. When you report 940, it excludes the draw. When you submit your payroll reports to 940, correct, you may have to provide other documentations. And so you would have to talk to the banker about that explicitly. But you have to prove that you paid yourself that, and then it should work. I have a question from Anthony. He said something about low interest rates. I'm not sure the question, which the rate is 1% that was set by the government on the loan. And so even if you don't qualify for any forgiveness, it'll be a loan that will be paid off over 24 months at a 1% interest rate. What do you do if your bank is not taking any more applications? Find a different bank that will be willing to hold it in the queue. I strongly recommend your community bank, your local bank, some of the smaller banks in your region, wherever that may be, are most likely to say, okay, we're going to create a list of names and we're just going to go down the list and we want your name on that list. And that's important. What if I own my office condo on one LLC and in my agency I pay rent to that other LLC? It's still rent and utilities for your business and you can absolutely use it. That's not a problem. So if you have the interesting question that came through, if you have a standard loan, not an SBA with another bank, can I use this money to pay that loan off? So technically, the money is to be used for payroll and rent and utilities. Essentially, what is required to keep your business open and keep your employees or yourself engaged in the economy and off the 22 million of unemployment payroll we're on right now. But the beauty of money is it's fungible, and to be honest, no one is going to, if you can document that you used payroll for the forgiveness piece of it, no one's going to come back and say, oh, you used that money to pay off loan. My recommendation right now is to hold on to the cash at least for the next 4 to 8 weeks before you use it to pay off any other debt. Because with so much uncertainty, you really don't know what you're going to need cash for. One of our strong recommendations right now is preservation of cash. And if you pay a lender off right now, the uncertainty of getting more loans is real in the environment we're in right now. And so I would hold on to the cash that you have. If you get funded, you're one of the few who've been approved and funded, I would hold that cash, even park it in an account. It doesn't cost you very much at a 1% interest rate, at least for the next several months until you've kind of learned what's going on in your particular case and in your region. So as more questions come in, I will follow up with them. I wanted to quickly look at what's called the EIDL, or the Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program. This is a program that's been around for a long time. It is a fairly standard program. It is designed for an extreme when a tornado or a hurricane or a natural disaster affects a region. Many people can use economic injury disaster loans if their businesses have been affected in those natural disasters. They've allowed applications for the COVID-19 in this environment. It's a very different type of application. It is not run through a bank. It's run through the SBA program directly. The rate is higher, but the term is a lot longer, and none of it is forgivable. And it's a very good program, but the level of proof that you need to provide that you've been damaged by the coronavirus is significantly higher than in the Paycheck Protection Program. There's the other aspect probably will be asked, can you apply for both? Yes, you can technically apply for both. You just can't technically use the money for the same thing. So if you're probably the cases where I've seen EIDL used, or at least considered in this current environment, are very hard hit areas. New York is an example, some of those areas of sorts, where it is clear there's been not just payroll issues, but massive economic injury, and people are looking to apply in those regions. So that is a separate program. It's run, the best way to apply for that program would be to go to sba.gov/disaster, and you don't work through a bank, you work directly with the SBA program. It has significantly more paperwork, a lot more proof that you need to provide, but it is a very reasonable rate at 3 3/4%. It's much lower than you're going to find anywhere else in the market, and it's over 30 years. So it's a very good program. It's just very different than the PPP. Let me circle back with a couple other questions in the interim here. On the B of A loan form under certifications and authorizations on the PPP application, addendum wanted me to check this box, which made no sense. I don't have a copy of the application in front of me at the moment, so I'm not sure exactly which box it is. But my experience has been if you're the business owner, do you have the authorization to sign for a loan for the business is potentially what you're asking. But I'm also, Jim, happy to research this and get back to you, or reach out to me directly and we can get that answer. The other question, any loan received under the 7B small business, that would be the economic injury disaster loan, was for the purpose of payroll costs. So there's certain things. If you applied for an EIDL prior to April 3rd, then you just have to be careful what your use of funds are, as you may trip up if you're applying for PPP. In that case, you really want to work with a banker directly to make sure you don't trip anything up. Any idea on turnaround, how long it's going to take for on the EIDL? And this person you hadn't heard anything as of yet. We are hearing EIDLs are taking a while, and that is an ill-defined point. PPPs are taking anywhere from 5 to 15 days. And so the program just opened up just 13 days ago, and people are just starting to get confirmations. There's a fair amount of funding that's happened as well. EIDLs are taking longer as they require much greater amount of paperwork associated with them. So I don't have a good view. They try to, historically, they try to do EIDLs in kind of the 2 to 4 week range so that they can get the money in as quickly as possible. I have not heard, someone said that they'd heard on online that EIDL is closed and out of money. That's not something we've seen. The PPP is, I wouldn't say closed, but it's out of money, and maybe there is a potential confusion on that. EIDL has deeper pockets and a lot less people have applied for it, but everyone is experiencing right now, things are changing very quickly, and it's not clear that things could be the case, and we're just finding out about it now, to be perfectly honest. EIDL, you apply directly with the SBA. The best place to start is sba.gov/disaster. SBA lenders will not, an SBA approved lender will not accept the disaster loan, the EIDL loan. That is only PPP you can go to an SBA lender for. So they're two separate programs, and you need to go to different parties for them. So please keep sending in your questions. Hopefully I can answer some of them as this is changing quickly and dive into it. I will try to move on to the next slide. And I think we've covered a fair amount of this, which is reach out to existing banking relationships. Don't trust everything you hear. And I can be wrong on some of these items because things are changing so quickly. There was another question just came in, and I'll bounce back and forth on the EIDL. That if the first $10,000 of an EIDL loan can be a grant and can be forgiven, and usually you can get the first $10,000 of an EIDL in a matter of days, and so it's just something to be aware of. It is a different sort of program than the PPP. It will take longer. Someone asked, they have no payroll and they have not yet applied. If it depends how you pay yourself. If you pay yourself via a 1099, then you personally can apply, and that may be more economically viable. If you have no W-2 payroll that you pay anyone, then it would just be getting rent and utilities covered, and it may be more advantageous to just 1099. Now, for you personally, it applies to 1099. So that's just something you have to look at the economics as to how would you get the most amount of dollars. Amber, I appreciate the information. The grant part of the EIDL is limited to 1,000 per employee that you had prior to the disaster. That is not something I've confirmed, but if you have, that's great. And I appreciate everyone's input on this, without a doubt. Some things you're going to have available, which is critically important, is if it's a bank you haven't worked with before, then you need all your corporate documentation that proves A, you're a corporation, and B, you as an individual can sign for the corporation. Those sometimes can take a little while to find, as well as all your payroll documentation, everything you need to have available. The application is relatively short. It's, if I recall, about 3 pages and a bunch of check boxes, and wants to know who the owners are and so on and so forth. So it just make sure you have your documentation ready, no matter which program you're interested in applying for. And the last piece is be patient. Yeah, unfortunately, I think in this environment, I think that's a fair advice. Be patient with the PPP, the SBA, your partner, your children, your animals, whatever the case may be. Question came through, would you recommend waiting to apply for EIDL until you hear back about PPP? You can apply for both, because you can't essentially apply for the same source of capital. It has to be somewhat separate. My recommendation would be apply for PPP first, then determine if you qualify for EIDL and whether that's capital that you need. But it wouldn't be a bad thing to apply for both, but PPP first and then EIDL. Let's see here. So this next slide is all the items, everything we kind of talked about. You'll have to excuse me as I'm talking about everything that you will need. Most of this is relatively clear. The application process has actually been pretty good, but these are the types of things that you will need when you're applying the application. Most lenders have transitioned to this to online, but the money center banks definitely have. Your local bank may be using a paper form, which is just as fine and very easy to fill out as well. And it depends on the specifics, but here are the type of documentation that you're going to need. And please keep the questions coming in, and I'm happy to answer them. We as AgileCap actually don't offer a PPP loan, as we are not technically a FDIC insured bank, or a specialty lender that focuses on the insurance industry. So if for some reason you don't qualify for a PPP, we're happy to talk to you. If you want to talk through what your various options are, myself or Kyle or anyone else on the lending team can work with you and guide you in the right place. The SBA can deliver, as we said, from 5 to 15 days. If for some reason you needed money in a shorter time than that, that's something that we can do. Or as the last bullet point, if people aren't accepting PPP applications anymore, I would still get on the wait list, but if you need funds in a critical sense. I would say, and I'll back up here, the key piece that is very unique is the forgiveness aspect of the PPP loan. And that essentially, very rarely will the government make it a grant, and the grant does not have tax implications as income to you either. And so that's a material difference than any other loan that you're going to get out there. There's going to be a lot of complications when you apply for the forgiveness because no one's done this before, but the clock starts ticking once you get the money, and it's the 8-week period afterwards on money that you're spending on employees and utilities and rent and things of that nature. And so once you've gone through all the troubles to get the money, you need to be really focused on your record keeping so that you can do a proof to get that forgiveness, as that's critically important. I want to open this up to other questions, PPP, SBA related, anything of that nature. Kathy, is there anything else we can, I don't know if we want to open up the mic to people, or with 50, 60
we can do that. Sure. If anybody wants to ask a question, as long as you dialed in your PIN, I can open up your mic. If you didn't dial in your PIN, I can't open your mic up, and you'd have to chat it in. So if you have a little green phone or a green mic next to your name, you can raise your hand. I'll be happy to open up your mic and let you ask the question. or chatted in. And do you have information too, while we're waiting for questions, that we can send to everybody as a follow-up, correct, from this session today? If you have materials that you want us to send out, I'll be happy to do that for you as well. All right, Tom Smith, I'm going to go ahead and open up your mic. Hi, Tom. How are you?
I'm good, thanks. So do I have this right that under the EIDL loan, it amounts to $1,000 per person that you had on payroll for the prior year? It's capped at that, correct?
That is not my understanding of it. I think it can be materially more than that, but I don't have that for certain.
So I'm reading right now, just so you guys I have an update from the Small Business Administration that says, to ensure the greatest number of applicants can receive assistance during this challenging time, the amount of your advance will be determined by the number of your pre-disaster, as of January 31st, 2020, employees. The advance will provide $1,000 per employee up to a maximum of $10,000.
So that is either brand new, because that could be the grant aspect of the EIDL, which is limited to $10,000, and that is meant to get you, even before you're approved for an EIDL loan, just get you cash. The best scenario, the program is designed as if
that's what I was just going to say. That's what Amber texted in or chatted into. She said this is just for the grant side of it. So Thank you, Amber, for that.
Yes. So the loan part has a much broader application and available uses, from complete payroll, not just $1,000. Any prior debts that you had, let's say you have acquisition capital or a line of credit or anything along those lines, your general accounts payable. So it's a very broad application, the EIDL. The grant piece is where you may see some limits on it.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you.
No problem. I'm happy to answer any questions about general finance and lending, what's going on, and insurance specific. I'll just give you a 1-minute overview of kind of what we're seeing. Is most banks are overwhelmed by this PPP process. And so we're seeing, if you had a loan in process or were looking to borrow money for an acquisition, and many people have paused that, appropriately so, it is a very difficult time to get your banker's attention. And one thing that we're not seeing, which is a good thing, in the 2008 time period, there was a lot of concerns about liquidity. It was basically a banking recession, and we related to mortgage-backed securities. And we're not seeing those same sort of warning signs that there's what we would call lack of liquidity in the banking market. Ultimately, we believe once we go through this emergent phase, and let's consider it's a very regional based process, but that's anywhere from hopefully 8 to 12 weeks in your region. Some places it's harder. You would expect things your banks would come back to normal. I would say they've worked through the PPP applications. They don't do the EIDL, so that wouldn't be on their plate, and they would be looking to returning back to normal lending in a recessionary period. So 2008 is probably not the best comparison, because that was really a banking driven recession and a lending driven one, versus where we are today. It's materially different. That being said, as we all know, insurance agencies are unique businesses, and they have intangible assets. You don't have inventory, you don't own machine factories, things like that. And so generally speaking, during recessions, intangible asset lending slows down first. And because banks may not feel comfortable with what's going on, or they may not understand your business as well as they do potentially loaning against some machine factory, equipment or new bulldozer or things like that, where other sorts of lending equipment may happen. So it's something to be aware of as we proceed through and out of the emergent phase of this period of time, that your bank may be less interested in lending to an insurance agency because it is really an intangible business. And that's just something to keep in mind as you're looking at what the future has for your business. Apply for the PPP, because it's a critical, a very economically advantageous opportunity, but as well, we just don't know what's going to happen with lending going forward. The one question just came through: if you receive the EIDL grant, are you required to then pursue? No, you can. What I don't know is if that grant, if you don't pursue the full EIDL, is it a grant or do you have to pay it back? And that is, I don't know the specifics on that component of it. So that was a question that came through. That's what I have to offer. I'm happy to open up to other questions. If my colleague Kyle or Wendy would like to add anything on what's going on, I'm happy to open up to them. Otherwise, we are available at AgileCap. The best way to reach out to us is the contact information we have up on this that we will send out to everyone in the audience. Kyle will be your primary source of contacts. His office and mobile information is here as well. And then we are online. You can find us on Twitter at AgileCap or Facebook, AgileCap Funds, or online at www.agilecap.com. Kyle, is there anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that we reach out and we talk to a lot of different agencies, a lot of different clients, some non-clients. We kind of have our, hand to the pulse of the insurance industry. And generally speaking, for the most part, there is some doom and gloom that we're seeing, but for the most part, agencies as a whole are being able to withstand this and being able to, come out of this economic, time period on their feet and rolling. And actually, I've spoken to several clients who are, they're saying that they've had their best sales, that they're having, more and more production. So I know there's a lot of focus on the doom and gloom. I tend to be an optimistic person and look for the good, and we're seeing a lot of good out there. So it's not that hard to find. But so if those of you who are out there and feel like you're the only one who's struggling, or you're the only one doing well, you're not alone in your situation. So I just kind of wanted to add that. So if you've got any other questions, we'd be happy to help or happy to assist. So.
Yeah, thanks, Kyle. I'll give a kind of a summary of what we're seeing, which is, I would say we've touched base with all of our clients, as Kyle said, and a solid 80% are seeing a stable business. And we're fortunate that insurance is recession muted because so many of the products, especially on the personal side, are regulatorily required, whether that's home or auto insurance. We are seeing, I would say, 10-ish% that are having problems. That has to do potentially with exposure, the type of insurance they're selling. But it's not unusual, but it is on the smaller side of things. But broadly speaking, in our client base, and that's hundreds of individuals, have been doing okay. The last piece I would add to that, Kyle, is it is very regional. That in one city or one town may be experiencing something very different than something as little as 100 miles away. And so we are seeing that variation. But, any other questions or comments or anything we can add, Kathy? I think you're muted, Kathy.
Thank you again. Thank you both, Peter, Kyle, and Wendy. I know all three of you for putting this on for everybody. I think you've answered quite a few questions here, educated a lot of us as well of maybe we didn't even or weren't even aware that these programs or funding opportunities were available. So we do appreciate you putting this on for everybody. I just wanted to let everybody know that I did go ahead and record today's session too. And we will send this out with all the contact information that you need if you have any additional questions. So you can feel free to reach out to either Peter or Kyle. It looks like Kyle's going to be our contact person moving forward. So we'll be able to share that with you along with any additional materials, Peter. I want you all to stay well and stay safe, stay well, keep your families well, you know, reach out to me if you have any questions or concerns that I can direct you. So thank you all. Appreciate
Thank you very much. Stay safe. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Great information, gentlemen. Great job.